Hi, 1996 brought us many amazing special editions and expansion packs, but because of the sheer number of amazing games released, we're skipping those today and only focusing on proper games. So, let's check the very best of 1996. Grand Prix II is a F1 racing simulator and a worthy successor to Geoff Cramont's classic World Circuit. It features a full FIA license, meaning you get to race against the legendary drivers of the time, Michael Schumacher, Damon Hill and Mika Hakkinen to name a few. It was also the closest thing to the real F1 that most gamers could realistically ever expect to happen to them. The underlying driving physics engine is actually really good and responds accurately to all the changes you make to your car. And that's where the beauty of this game lies. Now, I am not a car fanatic and don't claim to be knowledgeable when it comes to tuning in any real way, but even despite that, I can tell you that any and all modifications that you make to your car's brake bias, gear ratios, wings, sway bars, spuckers, springs and damper can be felt when driving and impact the performance and handling in a noticeable way. Each may shave off just a tiny bit of your lap time, but together, when set up correctly, this can make a difference that will put you ahead of the competition. You know, same as it is in F1 in real life. And since we're on how the game feels, I can't omit the presentation, it's fantastic. Not good or great, fantastic. Sure, when compared to games of today it looks bland and blocky, but in 1996 it was something else. I mean, take a look at the replays if you get a chance, they look so good that on a small 15-inch CRT it could be argued that the game was close to being photorealistic. Grand Prix II set a new standard for F1 simulations in 1996, and it was one that the others had to strive to compare themselves to. If you're a fan of the sport, it's not only the best F1 racer of 1996, but also a must-have. Fantasy General is a turn-based strategy set in a fantasy world with some steampunk overtones, and it's based off Panzer General's engine. It's not a simple reskin, however, but a full-fledged game that stands on its own and is my most favorite out of all games in the SSI's General series. Story-wise, as in most games in a similar setting, evil has taken over the world, and you're summoned as a champion to dispose of it and set the world free. There are 4 heroes to choose from, each representing a different realm of power and each having access to 10 unique unit types with multiple upgrade levels each. Well, not each, as actually some of the units are not upgradable, but definitely most. Majority of the game takes place on a hexagonal overworld battle map and works the same way it does in other General Series games. So, requires taking into account terrain features your units are on and making sure that your army has the right mix of units to be viable in all situations. Please ignore a really bad gameplay in the footage, I've been having some issues with the scrolling speed and wanted to go for as many battles in as short time as possible to show off different units. There are however separate screens for unit recruitment, research and financial management, but that's pretty much it. Everything else happens on that aforementioned overworld map. Fantasy General is excellent, it looks great, it plays great and most importantly is hella fun, both in single player campaign and single battle multiplayer skirmishes. Once again, playing as the nameless soldier, you have to save the world. Or your base really, but if it would fall, the rest of the world would soon follow. The base has been overrun by the aggressive creatures hailing straight from another dimension, and when you arrive there, all your fellow soldiers are long gone. So you, being you, so not only dangerous but also the only human in existence with IQ over 9000, decide on clearing the base and then seeking out the teleport that would take you to their homeworld to exact your revenge. It could be argued that while Wolfenstein created the FPS genre, Doom popularized it with its polished and enjoyable design, but Quake changed it forever, bringing it straight into the 21st century, and for years ahead of it no less. It was the first ever fully 3D first-person shooter, the first that featured all of its elements built in an engine that did not use 2D sprites at all, so not only levels but also all enemies and objects present in the game are polygonal, which while a bit more demanding hardware-wise, also allowed for much more realistic enemy animations and lighting, and most of all simulated in-game physics. So, fallen enemies drop to the ground more realistically, grenades bounce off the walls, there is a definite weight to some of the shots from some guns, and all that is just scratching the surface. The game consists of 4 episodes split into smaller levels. They feature many different kinds of enemies, human, monster and otherworldly, and pretty decent selection of weapons to choose from, or to collect really, as there's not that much choice, you just have to find them. Usually hidden inside corridors or behind uninterestingly looking objects. Quake was one of the first games natively offering support for multiplayer over the internet rather than just LAN, and it had 6 arena maps designed specifically for this multiplayer madness. and it was a madness, but in the best meaning of the word. Quake was a huge stepping stone for the future of FPS games, and regardless if you liked it or not, its importance cannot be overstated. The superiority of one over another can naturally be argued for hours on end, but personally, I enjoyed Jagged Alliance Deadly Games more than the original. While the first game took place on a single island and had an overarching plot to follow and work towards, Deadly Games is a set of linear mercenary missions where you lead your team through all of them, conquering more and more demanding challenges. Some may find the lack of deep story and strategic layer lacking, but I didn't mind it as much, at least not back in the day. It's because Jagged Alliance's strategic layer was never as good as the one in UFO or XCOM was, so not something I was heavily invested in, and frankly speaking, I found tree planting and guard recruitment rather tedious. I loved the combat though and had more than enough of it here. The other thing that was changed from the base game, and one that I actually did actively despise, was the turn limit, meaning each mission had a set number of turns to complete, so you either had to play more aggressively than you would have otherwise, or treat them as tactical puzzles to solve, getting the best outcome possible while sustaining the smallest in scope losses, keeping your mercs in tip-top form for the next mission to come. But along with questionable, bad and irrelevant changes also came the good ones, and quite a few of these actually. New mission types were added, tons of new weapons and gear, 10 new mercenaries, obviously as polarizing as the original were, a co-op multiplayer mode, which you know, in games like this one is more than fun, and a built-in campaign editor. And I don't have to tell you how much I love these. I mean, even if I don't use them myself as much, having access to user-created content, new, longer, better and more creatively put together missions and campaigns is just great. Gameplay-wise, Deadly Games is super fun. You begin by picking up to 6 mercenaries and equipping them and jumping straight into the missions. And since you have access to all the original and new mercs, there's a lot of them to pick from. They all differ not only in their specializations and stats, but also in their origins and character, meaning that they all may have histories with one another and particular opinions on how they're being teamed up. Some may straight up refuse to join your band of merry killing machines just because someone else is already in a party, or on the flip side, work better because they're with someone they enjoyed the company of. It's mechanically a simple concept, but adds a lot to the atmosphere of running your own merc squad and managing different characters and not just quote-unquote units on the map. In other words, and you can quote me on that, Jagged Alliance Deadly Games is basically the A-Team simulator. Combat is naturally turn-based and it uses action points for everything that you can do each turn, and as long as you have them, action points that is, you can take as many actions as you'd like. Be it attacks, movements, stance change, picking up, dropping or using of objects, opening locked doors, containers and the likes. Doing anything really. And each merc has their own set of these entirely dependent on his/her stats. The stats are health, agility, dexterity, wisdom, medicine, explosives, mechanics and marksmanship, and they influence nearly everything in the game. Deadly Games may have dropped the overarching strategic background and focused on squad tactics, which many may have not liked, but personally I was more than fine with it, as I was never big on gardening and farmer training. Realms of the Haunting is a mixture of an adventure and first-person shooter. It's an unusual concoction, but one that surprisingly works pretty well. It uses improved version of Normality's engine and serves very deep and good occult adventure, using heaps upon heaps of full-motion videos spread over 4 game CDs. While you're experiencing the game world through the first-person viewpoint, there's a free-floating mouse hand on the screen at all times, used to interact with the objects in the game. So, you'll be leaving your greasy paw prints everywhere, touching anything and everything, investigating the locales that you'll visit. Puzzles that you'll be solving are generally speaking logical and not based on trial and error, but beware, because quite often you'll be pixel hunting for that one particular object or a place to click on. Like I said, you'll touch a lot of things. It's not a game-breaking issue, but definitely something worth mentioning. Story-wise, Realms of the Haunting starts off as a typical haunted house story, but soon enough it evolves into end-of-the-world tale of a cult-based drama. You're Adam Randall, a son of deceased priest, and you're sent off to investigate a haunted mansion that's supposedly linked to your father's death. It quickly turns out that the mansion is an old satanic temple, and it's full of both demons and evil spirits. Also unwashed dishes, but that's something you're not there to sort out. When inside, after a short while, you learn that the person who sent you there is actually a 500 years old sorcerer who's bent on the world destruction. The game's really good, so if you like the adventure horror titles and don't mind FMV plots, you'll love it. I loved Back to the Future movies. All of them. Even the third one that most, for whatever the reason, don't seem to enjoy. I did, and I wish there was more. But there aren't, so I'm happy that there were at least 3. And the cast? Oh my days, they couldn't have picked better. Marty, Doc and Biff, great timeless characters. By 1996 it was clear that there were no more new Back to the Future movies on the horizon, especially given Michael J. Fox's condition. So, when I saw that Christopher Lloyd would star in a game, a seemingly hilarious one at that, I was instantly curious and on board of the whole Roger Rabbit-like idea. Toonstruck is a point-and-click adventure in vein of earlier humorous LucasArts games made in reverse Who Framed Roger Rabbit style, meaning that all the backgrounds and characters were animated graphics and only Christopher Lloyd was digitized. He plays Drew Blank, a cartoonist who gets trapped in a cartoon world of his own creation. The land is overrun by a Count Nefarious and his goons, and Drew has to stop him. To do so, you'll need to locate several items and help in assembling of the machine that will be able to counter him. Drew is accompanied throughout the most of his adventure by a cartoon sidekick going by the name of Flux, and he can be used in many of the puzzles, same way any other item would. Which is an interesting mechanic, definitely adding to the fun factor. Oh, and the conversations with over 50 original characters are done using icons as subjects for them, and it's good to always start with an ice cube icon for breaking the ice, so to speak, as it's easier to carry on after. Also, when the ice melts into a puddle of water on that icon, it means that all the options with a particular character at the time have already been exhausted. Toonstruck is full of odd and quirky cartoon humor, and the puzzles are fun and sorta make sense if you keep in mind that everything in it is based on weird cartoon logic, that is. Hail to the king, baby! Duke Nukem 3D is a fun and full of dark humor and pop culture references 2.5D first-person shooter that you definitely know everything about already. You played it and loved it when you saw it first more than 20 years ago. It takes place in futuristic LA that's been invaded by the aliens. And naturally, when there's something strange in the neighborhood, when there's something weird and it don't look good, who you gonna call? No one, cause it's you who's gonna be called to come and deal with it. And your 28-level strong adventure of eradication of aliens invading LA, filled with one-liners galore, will take you on an ass-kicking adventure straight from the streets of the city through dozens of differently themed locales. I mean, you'll fight on a football field, on and around Japanese-style villa, and even on the space station. Not necessarily in that order. You'll battle through thousands of aliens, some of which look like failed Cold War-era Soviet experiments being half-men, half-pigs, while others are more akin to skinny and wimpy predators, torn out of their hunters' armors. And these are but a few from a wide number of odd monstrosities. The arsenal you'll wield to rid the earth of the alien scum one corpse at a time is pretty varied too, and consists of anything from our Earth standard weaponry, so pistols, shotguns and the likes, all the way to rocket launchers, alien blasters of various kinds and even a shrinking ray, which while not causing any damage itself can reduce the enemy to the size of an ant that you can then promptly stomp on, leaving but a small crimson colored stain on the sole of your boot. Other than that, you'll have a whole set of various pieces of gear like jetpacks, night vision goggles, distraction holograms, steroids, medikits and the likes, all to aid you in your annihilation bonanza. Now, while all that seems fun and all, like hours of content and shipping containers worth of alien remains to leave behind, Duke Nukem's strongest suit is his personality. He is a badass and he knows it. He doesn't need anyone reminding him of that. In fact, whenever he gets a chance, he makes sure to let everyone know that he is himself. And it's as cringe as it is fun, and you just can't help but love it. Duke Nukem 3D was the first FPS I played in multiplayer. And while I did play earlier games in deathmatch mode too, it was actually not on their original release dates, and Duke popped my multi-shooting cherry. And I don't think that I've ever rediscovered the same stupidly fun feeling in multiplayer in other shooters as I experienced playing Duke. It was amazing. I mean, I remember hiding somewhere, camping, checking the cameras all the time, trying to snipe that buddy of mine who seemingly disappeared, just to have him jump out from behind and shoot me point blank in the back of my head. Because while I was looking for him, he was following me stealthily, so that whenever I checked the cameras, they didn't spot him as he was not far, well hidden, just a step or two behind. It was incredible and super fun. For both of us, shooter and the shootee. I could say victim, but I was talking about creating new worlds with someone recently, and it just felt right to craft one here on the spot. Oh, and I loved the build editor too. Very easy and fun to use tool to craft your own stages. So, Duke Nukem 3D is super fun, even today, check it out. Lords of the Realm 2 is a mix of a game. part turn-based resource and kingdom management, in which you have to breed cows, produce dairy, cultivate grain, mine iron and stone, produce weapons and manage your population and its happiness levels while keeping them safe from external and internal dangers and disruptions. But it's also partially a real-time strategy, controlling individual units or group formations of units during battles and sieges, offering various unit types from melee through ranged all the way to the siege engines, with their own strengths and weaknesses. So crossbowmen, for instance, while considerably more deadly than the archers, had a shorter range and were slower to attack. Lords of the Realm II supersedes previous title in the series, improving on all aspects of gameplay considerably, so the fans of an earlier game will no doubt love it. The overall gameplay revolves around holding your counties secure, grabbing new ones, building larger castles and keeping peasantry well fed and happy, as they are the cornerstone of your kingdom. The kingdom that is also only as strong as its weakest link is. Presentation-wise, Lords 2 is a mixed bag too. On one hand, the interface is readable and easy to comprehend, and on another, the graphics are tad behind what was the standard when it released. That said, for what it is, so strategy, it doesn't make too much of a difference and don't break the immersion whatsoever. Sounds and music are actually pretty good and well-fitting, so they're a definite highlight of the game. To be honest with you guys, I haven't played Lords 2 in at least like 20 years now, so I'm not sure if I would still like it now as much as I did back then, but from what I remember is that the cows are everywhere. It's cows here, cows there, cows all around, and that I found it pretty addicting. Game, not the cows. Not as much as Civilization 2 or SimCity 2000, but enough to spend few weeks playing it exclusively anyway. So, if you like medieval-themed strategies and don't mind a bit odd real-time and turn-based mixture, Lords of the Realm 2 is a good game to waste some time at. Discworld 2, The Mortality Bytes is a point-and-click adventure game based on Terry Pratchett's series of humorous fantasy novels set on a mythical Discworld. You're once again Rincewind, a laughingstock of a whole wizardly world, and you're tasked with the burden of coercing Death himself out of his impromptu retirement and back to his duties. A task and a half if you ask me. Sounds interesting, right? Well, it is, and most importantly, it's hella fun. And you know what? That's also exactly what majority of players thought too in 1996. And Discworld 2 was as big, if not bigger, commercial success than the first game. Obviously, as in most other adventure titles, both conversations and inventory puzzles are an important part of it and required to progress, and they are as hilarious as you can expect them to be coming from an earlier game. While sound design is on comparable level to the first Discworld, the graphics have been hugely improved and are now in full high-color, high-resolution SVGA mode. They look as if they were taken straight out of the cartoon. They're just beautiful. So detailed and so smooth, but personally I like those older pixelated ones better. I'm a sentimental fool though and have a lot of melancholy for pixels in their full square glory. That's me, however, and objectively speaking, second Discworld's overall presentation is on a much higher quality level than previously. Discworld 2 came out in an interesting time, when adventure games were slowly being phased out by other genres, overtaking them in popularity, especially RTS and FPS that were the new it. So if you're a fan of point-and-clickers, seek it out as it's one of the last few good ones, at least for another decade or so. Archimedean Dynasty is a sci-fi first-person underwater shooter simulation mixture and a prequel to later Aquanox. In the far-off future, seemingly never-ending wars for resources finally led Earth to nuclear destruction, polluting the surface so heavily that living on it is not possible anymore. The radiation, lack of sustainable resources of food and water forced us to move underground. Or underwater, to be precise. We settled in the depths of oceans in the world aptly named Aqua. By 27th century, it was divided into Democratic Atlantic Federation, the oligarchy of the Arabic Clans Union, and the monarchist Russo-Japanese Shogunate. All awesome names, I must add. Very Star Trek-y, even if set underwater and not in space. You play as a mercenary, and you complete series of missions, all with very varied primary and secondary objectives centered around underwater combat. In the process of doing so, as you progress through the story, you'll uncover a deep political conspiracy that you'll find yourself unwillingly intertwined in. Money earned playing will be spent mainly on upgrades for your weaponry, torpedoes, generators, hull plating, combat software and noise reduction technology, which for all intents and purposes is just a stealth mode for your craft. Since we're on the subject, you'll need to manage your expenses smartly, so that you'll never find yourself in a situation where you have to choose between rearming or repairing your hull, as that would pose a serious risk to your further progress. Archimedean Dynasty not only plays great and offers very believable and true-to-life physics, but also looks fantastic. it's equally as beautiful as its desolate and alone feeling in dark and moody depths of the oceans. It's probably the only game out there that could bring descent-like shooters lovers and flight simulation fanatics together, as it's equally as fast and action-packed as it is deep. Terrible pun intended. Screamer 2 is an arcade racer that at the time of its release was universally loved, as it was genuinely phenomenal. I used to play it semi-competitively against my father for a better part of 1 year in the 90s. We didn't play it in split screen, as it didn't offer high enough frame rate to do so on our home PC, but each of us raced on his own, and then the game would save our times and we would try to one-up one another as if we were playing some kind of a mental challenge game, in which whomever got to the first spot would rule the castle. This particular castle being our household. It goes without saying that even if I won occasionally, I had no saying in how things were or weren't at home. I was cheated out of my rule, if you ask me. Anyway, we would try out various different strategies that we came up with, like cutting corners fast or late, not all of them obviously, only those that were worthy, manual switching for those fraction of a second differences, for perfect gear changes, different control schemes with my father famously well, as in famously within our four walls, moving acceleration and brake to one side of the keyboard and turning to another, playing two-handed as opposed to using default arrows control scheme, and many more. Some better, some worse. And whenever one of us managed to overtake another, he would gloat for as long as the record was not broken. It was great. Ultimately, despite my best effort, he was better than I. That said, I feel that I might have had much more fun, and I definitely remember it to this day and know for a fact that his memory of this time is heavily distorted. He is convinced that we played it on the Amiga using joysticks, you see. Oh well, other than that, it's an amazing arcade racer, worth every minute spent at it. It features 4 fictional rally cars, each of them feeling unique and behaving differently on a track, following the formula of the easier to drive the particular car is, the slower its max speed, and the more challenging one is to keep in the lane, the faster it can go. The tracks are all different from one another too and spread across the entire world, so you may as well be going through British countryside and small towns, as well as dry sands of Egypt or sleepy snows of Finland. It's fantastic, and the arcade racing experience itself is the best that the PC could offer at the time, and much better than Sega's lacking arcade conversions. Tex Murphy The Pandora Directive is a sequel to Under a Killing Moon and a fantastic point-and-click FMV adventure game. Yeah, I know what I said. It is set in 2043 in San Francisco, dystopian post-nuclear megalopolis in which humans and mutants coexist. And you play as Tex once again, a private investigator and one with one of the most heavily working livers in the world. As per usual, money is short, living conditions are dire, and the ends are difficult to be met. So when you're contacted by one Gordon Fitzpatrick, an ex-research scientist, and offered a case of finding his missing friend Dr. Malloy, you jump on it like a toothless junkie jumps on a bag of crackers, so maniacally and not prepared for the experience ahead at all. While initially it may seem like a typical case of a missing person, oddly intertwined with series of seemingly random murders, soon enough it will develop into a full-fledged mystery, a complex political conspiracy, and even scientific discoveries proving former existence of an alien civilization on Earth and their abandoned and dangerous technology that was left behind. And whether you wanted to or not, you will find yourself in a spot from which you'll be able to, nay, you'll need to, decide how to not only deal with it all, but also secure the tech before it gets in the wrong hands. And trust me, most hands are the wrong hands. The Pandora Directive is filled to the brim with interesting and demanding but not unfair puzzles, a story that is very X-Files in its feels surprisingly deep, well written and acted out, and full of twists and turns that will keep you glued to your seat all throughout it. Let's be honest here, most FMV games are trash, this one isn't. Not only it's huge and captivating, but also features a lot of replayability, serving numerous paths to progress through, and 7 entirely different endings. If you enjoyed previous games in the series, this one's a no-brainer. But if you've not played it, don't let it discourage you from trying this one out, it's excellent. I love De4th Rally. I have very fond memories of it, playing it with my younger sister and a friend, and having a blast of a time doing so. It's a top-down arcade-style racer that's very similar in its design to Micro Machines or supercars, but expanding considerably upon what these two offer. For one, you don't only win races by being the first, you can win by being the only one left driving. Because as the title may have given it away, there is much more to De4th Rally than just racing. there's plenty of dev too. It features weapons active and passive, and 4 different levels of car upgrades: engine to increase top speed, tires that improve traction and reduce drifting, and armor that reduces incoming damage of all kinds. Before each race, if you can afford it, you can buy those and also mines and rocket fuel. But your opponents are not sleeping content with what they drive either, and they're preparing for the races as well. The game offers 19 tracks and 6 cars, each next better than the previous, all obviously upgradable. There are 4 cars in each race, and only first 3 earn money for it, and the last one goes home with nothing. Well, to be precise, damaged car, repair cost debt, and nothing. If he survives, that is. While racing, you get to pick ammo recharges, rocket fuel refills, and money drops popping on each track. And whoever picks them up first gets to keep or use them. Monetary bonuses picked up from races depend on the car that you're driving, and the better the car, the more you will get. All the shooting and mines aside, your ultimate goal is to get to the top of the championship table and defeat the boss driver, your adversary, nay, your nemesis, on the last special track. And while winning is fun, De4th Rally is one of those games where the road is more fun than the destination itself. It's a great and addictive game, and you should definitely try it out if you enjoy arcade racers. Taking place in the provinces of High Rock and Hammerfell of Tamriel, Daggerfall is a successor to Bethesda's Arena, and a game titled after High Rock's capital city. Like with most Bethesda's games, you can be sure of 3 things. First, that it released full of bugs. It did, and it actually took several patches originally to get the game to the point where it wouldn't hang seemingly on random. Secondly, that it's an open-ended title that allows for complete freedom of choice of where to go and what to do next, and does not require you to follow the main storyline whatsoever. Also, something that is fulfilled as expected. And finally, you can bet that the game is big, and it is. Huge actually. I believe that to this day, it offers the single biggest game world of any game ever made that was not set in space, even if majority of the world is generated and populated randomly. Daggerfall, in fact, may be the biggest Bethesda's game content-wise too. It allows you to join many political or social organizations, so guilds, or try to get better and better pursuing power of your own. You can buy horses, houses, and even ships. And you can become the werewolf, wereboar, or a vampire. Sadly, you can become a spider pig, manbat, or a traveling window cleaner, but that's pretty much all you can't be. In Daggerfall, you can interact with literally thousands of NPCs. Granted, given the game's random nature, most of these interactions is superficial, but they're there, so that's not nothing. Daggerfall doesn't skim on details either. Your character can come from any of the 9 provinces of Tamriel, and these not only differ in the race of their inhabitants, but also species, meaning not all are necessarily human. There's also 18 classes to choose from, with numerous primary and secondary trainable skills. When you create your character, you can skip picking a particular class, however, and make your own by selecting all skills and abilities by hand as you please. Not many games from other developers allowed for such freedom of choice, and not many do even to this day. Especially that it's a two-edged sword. You can create a character that could potentially be much better than any of the ones included, a demigod even, but you can also make one that's going to end up being borderline unplayable, dying left and right whenever any enemy farts around it. All skills, primary and secondary, are raised with use rather than arbitrary levels, so the more you jump, the higher your jump will be, the more you swing your sword, the stronger those swings will be and will connect more often, and so on and so on and so on. It's the best system that any RPG could use in my opinion, as it mimics real life as best as it's possible. The combat is entirely real-time, and you use your melee and ranged weapons by holding the right mouse button and performing various moves with your mouse. This was rather new and interesting idea in 1996, but also a really bad one. It made the combat unnecessarily stressful and clunky, as you could never really tell if a miss was caused by too low skill on your character or your failure at mouse gymnastics. Some things are better left less realistic than others, it seems. Naturally, Daggerfall features magic too, and upon getting Mages Guild membership, you'll be able not only to buy spells, but also receive appropriate training and make your own spells as well. They help with identification of magical weapons too, so that's also worth keeping in mind. Graphically, Daggerfall is not a show-off, but given the scope of the game, I think it can be forgiven, as the sheer amount of content more than makes up for it. I haven't said anything about the story yet, as you may have noticed, and I won't. I won't rob you of experiencing it firsthand. All that I will say is that you'll be on a mission from the Emperor Uriel Septim himself, and it will involve freeing a particular ghost, finding an important letter containing information about dangerous ancient power, and resurrecting of an iron golem. It will be a blast. Zork Nemesis: The Forbidden Lands is an adventure game, 11th in the long-running series of Zork games and one mechanically very similar to everyone's favorite classic, Myst. Four of the great Underground Empire's greatest and most talented alchemists disappeared in the so-called Forbidden Lands, in the day of a solar eclipse some time ago no less. They were searching for the Quintessna, a secret to the eternal life. The Empire sent Bivotar, Imperial spy, to locate them and figure out what happened. Guess what? He never returned either. As the next completely disposable person on a rather long list of names, you're sent to figure it all out. So, you have your last burger, your last pizza and last steak, and head off on your potentially also last mission. When you arrive, however, you discover that the alchemists were slain by a demon known as the Nemesis, and it becomes your, wait for it, Nemesis. I couldn't help myself, sorry. So you decide to finish the work that the alchemists started, and this alone is enough to set the Nemesis on a path of wanting to end you. You are a crafty fellow, however, and ally yourself with the spirits of the dead alchemists, in the process uncovering rather uncomfortable truth about the events that really transpired 2 years before, during the eclipse. All of the locations in Zork Nemesis allow for a pretty wide scope of rotation so that you can investigate them in near-perfect detail, missing nothing important and leaving no crucial items behind. And it will be hella important, as most puzzles are pretty demanding and will require you to find and figure out a lot of clues to solve them. Some can be beaten by triggering something, interaction with a particular object, or using the right combination of them in a correct spot. So it's not your usual simple point-and-click fare. That said, figuring out the more complex ones feels really rewarding, and generally speaking, hardcore fans of the genre hold Zork Nemesis in a very high regard, praising its story, puzzles and how it manages to mix the dark and very gruesome at times story and setting with small and well-placed humorous elements. Indycar Racing II is a follow-up to earlier Indycar and an incredibly competent and fun racing simulator by Papyrus. It used all the technological improvements that they've introduced with their other game NASCAR Racing and supported many advanced for the time graphical features, like high-resolution texture mapped 3D graphics, multiple camera views for gameplays and replays, and painstakingly detailed models for cars. But most importantly, it reworked the simulation aspect of the racing to the extreme. It was so polished, in fact, that its shine was one of the few things that could be seen with a naked eye from an orbit. Don't fact check that, trust me, I'm a pro. Opponent drivers' AI, detailed lifelike physics and realistic simulation of damage were top-notch too. It was a true technological achievement, whether you cared for the racers or not. Oh, and if all that wasn't enough, you could tweak and customize your car's performance to your heart's content, changing nearly everything. And each, even the smallest of the modifications made, actually influenced how the car behaved on the track and how it felt to drive. It was magnificent. If you add to it that it featured 15 true-to-life tracks, omitting Miami and Indianapolis only, Indycar Racing II ended up being beautiful and equally as playable simulator, so if you're into the sport at all, it's worth revisiting even today. Broken Sword: The Shadow of the Templars, aka The Circle of Blood, is an excellent type of a modern point-and-click adventure game and the first part of the series that very quickly gained huge popularity and in time a cult following. Deservedly so, I must add, even if it came out in a time when I was on a few years long hiatus from adventure games. That said, it's one of the very few adventure game series that could be compared to early LucasArts point-and-clickers, so the absolute best of the best in the genre. And no wonder, as the developer, Revolution Software, was responsible for earlier Beneath a Steel Sky and Lure of the Temptress titles, both incredible games in their own rights. Broken Sword places you in shoes of George Stobbart, an American tourist in Paris who barely escapes with his life after a seemingly random bombing of a cafe he was in. As a result of that, he decides to investigate the clues left behind by the killer dressed as a clown. It appears that the culprit only ever aimed to kill an old man sitting there and steal his briefcase. This unforeseen chain of events from then onward will take you on a hell of an adventure all around Europe and Middle East, where with help of Nicole Collard, French journalist who was supposed to meet with an old man, you will attempt to unravel a deep conspiracy involving a sinister cult and a hidden treasure. Broken Sword's story is incredibly captivating, the pacing is brilliantly balanced, and the serious subject and tone of the plot is nicely countered by the humor and beautiful graphics. I mean, the backgrounds alone are the works of art, not to mention the character sprites that not only look but also animate in such a quality and style that it's hard to believe that they're a part of a game and not ripped from an animated movie. All that, coupled with excellent voice acting and well-fitting music tracks, lends to Broken Sword, easily grabbing numerous nominations, awards and countless praises from both critics and gamers alike. If you're at all into adventure games and never heard of it, definitely check it out today, if possible. Those of you who've been watching these videos of mine and saw my 10 years of DOS gaming know that I've never played any of the Mechwarrior games. Neither the classics nor the new ones, despite the latest one even being included in a Game Pass for a while. Nothing against them whatsoever, they're just not really my cup of tea. So everything you'll hear here will be what I found about today's game online. And I've no experience with it at all, short of this video recording. Kinda like I have no experience of being wealthy, but I did read about it online and it seems cool, I must add. Not even the buying of whatever you want part of it, but throwing money at problems. It speaks to me deeply. I mean, you get ill, boom, money thrown, and you get good specialist and proper care. Your fridge broke down, or even few hard disks in a span of a couple months, don't worry, don't wait for the sale, just go out and get the replacement. Student debt or mortgage? How about paying them both in one swoop transfer? That kind of rich is so cool to me. Anyway, seems I'm all over the place, but not here and not talking about Mechwarrior II Mercenaries. It's a standalone follow-up to basic Mechwarrior II, and while original saw you either siding with Wolf or Jade Falcon clans and following the plot set deeply in Battletech universe, this game puts you in position where you only care for number one. Yourself, if that wasn't clear. So you run a small company of mercs, and your loyalty does not lie with any of the sides of the conflict, but rather with the sweet money. Whichever of the sides pays more will get your help, support and ass-kicking skills. So you'll be buying and equipping mechs, hiring pilots and taking part in many conflicts spread over numerous campaigns. Same as original, Mercenaries 2 feature excellent graphics and sound and hella addictive gameplay for those who are into this kind of a loop. Tomb Raider is arguably one of the most important games not only of 1996, but gaming overall. It was the first full 3D third-person perspective arcade adventure title that gained such a huge, cult-like following. I suppose it can be in large part attributed to the wrist-overflowing protagonist, Miss Lara Croft and her busty chest, but if I was to simplify it to just that, I would be doing this game a disservice. Sure, Lara, given the amount of available at the time polygons, definitely looks like a woman, if she was cut down from a log of wood that is, but she's also charismatic, interesting, Indiana Jones-like character that stands on her own merit. Come to think of it, she's only one of 3 main reasons for Tomb Raider's immense success, the other 2 being level design and gameplay. The first one was truly sight to behold, well perhaps it isn't anymore, but in 1996 it was awakening imaginations of millions of players who got the arcade Indiana Jones game that they always wanted, but never before got a chance to experience because either technical limitations or lack of imagination on the side of the devs, with all the treasures, traps, exotic enemies, tombs and even secrets to discover. And gameplay, believe it or not, but it was even better. In this new, expertly executed full 3D environment, Lara could easily run around, jump, climb, swim and fight through hundreds of enemies. And all those moves of her were so fluid, so lifelike, most of us couldn't believe it. And everyone who could run it at a reasonable frame rates played Tomb Raider, whether they like arcade games or not. Lara can wield and use different kinds of weapons and items, and switching between them is just a matter of a key press. Tomb Raider was a hit, a huge one. It was one of those games that changed the world and pop up maybe once or twice per decade. Tomb Raider was the same thing to the 3D third-person arcade adventure games that Doom was to first-person shooters. Is it okay if I just say that Wing Commander for the Price of Freedom is best out of all Wing Commander games and a culmination of the series so that we could move on? It's not? Oh, okay. Let's see. By 1996, Origin were the absolute masters of interactive movie games. They found the perfect genre, the perfect formula, they've hired only the best actors and worked on the best scripts, and most of all, they figured out the ratio, the balance, the golden divider between gameplay and cinematics. And even though the interactive movie games are nearly non-existent today, it could be argued that they peaked in 1996 with Wing Commander 4. Better? Can I go now? No, seriously. Okay, I'll carry on. The Price of Freedom, same as previous games in the series, is a space combat simulation at heart, and you follow the campaign based on the story told by cinematics. It's presented in an attractive and dynamic mission structure, so the one that we like the most, in which the next mission's objectives and difficulty is based on your performance in previous ones. And they're not only kill missions anymore and can be recon flights, salvage, capture or infiltrations too. Some you have to approach without radar, at others you'll fly close to the blinding nebulas, there's hardly ever going to be a time to get bored. and if not a new challenge, the game will drop interesting gameplay modifiers at you nearly at all times. Wing Commander 4 picked what was best in the last 3 games and made a brand new one out of all of it while adding features. It looks great in high-res, it sounds great, and most of all, plays amazingly too. Master of Orion II Battle of Antares is a sci-fi turn-based 4X strategy game set in space, and a title that I really did not want to talk about. Not because I didn't like it, quite the contrary, but because I saw the fear of doing so. It's such a huge and iconic game that everyone's bound to have an opinion about it, and many will be just waiting there at the edge of their keyboards to point out any and all omissions. On the other hand, it's a game that cannot be skipped in a video like this one, so whether I feel comfortable doing so or not, I have to cover it. Master of Orion II is a sequel to the first game, but in reality it remakes it from scratch, fixing what required doing so and improving in many areas to become this de facto benchmark for turn-based space strategies for the years to come. A game that others will strive to become or surpass, and hardly any will ever manage to touch, even to this day. Master of Orion II is a definition of 4X, so extreme, extra exciting experience. Or explore, expand, exploit and exterminate, both fit as well in my eyes. And it puts you in shoes, where appropriate that is, of one of the 13 available alien species, that all want to conquer the surrounding star systems and become the titular Master of Orion. An elusive title that has literally no meaning behind it whatsoever. All that said, if any of the 13 default races is not to your liking, you can always customize your own, which I would recommend if you've played plenty enough games with others. Master of Orion II can be won in one of 3 ways, and interestingly enough, not all are military. First is through conquest of all others, which is quite obvious winning condition, as when you're the last race left, you quite obviously won the game. Or lost, depending how you want to look at it. Then there is diplomatic victory, for which you need to be voted as the supreme leader of the galaxy. And finally, the victory that supports the game's title, meaning finding the race of Antarans and destroying them as you do. Anyway, while there may only be 3, the road to either will be a very long one full of conflicts and many twists and turns, and may even make you reevaluate mid-game how you want to try to win it all. But in games like Master of Orion or Civilization, it's hardly ever all about the final victory, and most of the time fun comes from the journey to that elusive achievement rather than it in particular. So you'll be responsible for everything, micro and macro managing of your entire empire, to the last minuscule detail. You'll manage your conquered planet's natural resources, you'll build various facilities and ships for your fleet too, you'll explore the galaxy, set out new colonies, engage in diplomacy, trade or even war. And combat is turn-based and pretty tactical. Perhaps not on the level of games that base their whole premise on it, but it's deep enough to fit within Master of Orion's 2 other intertwined mechanics. You will also engage in a lot of research, improving technological standing of your race, and then utilize these new discoveries to develop faster and better than others. But it's not all about math and min-maxing your race to the top. There are also random events that happen from time to time, strange artifacts that can appear in orbits of unexplored planets, and even wormholes, allowing for near instantaneous traversal between far-off systems. And all that is just the tip of an iceberg that Master of Orion II is. It's a ginormous game is what I'm saying here. And if you're a fan of deep and engaging strategies, and even better, have at least passing interest in space, it's definitely a title to steal days if not weeks from your life. Oh, and the presentation aside, since it's appropriately simple for the genre, it's still as playable today as it was when it originally released. I know that I've tried it today before, but maybe this time it will work. Would you forgive me and accept it if I just said that Descent 2 is same as Descent 1 but newer and better? You wouldn't? Oh, okay. Then tough, cause that's precisely what it is. Not only obviously, but in essence. If I was to describe it in only one sentence, that's what I would have said. But if you'd like to know more, then it's also a full 3D all-axis sci-fi shooter with an unparalleled freedom of movement. Sure, it could be credited to the fact that you control a flying drone/ship of sorts, but whatever, it changes nothing. In no other shooter of the time you get to move in such a freeform and natural way. As I was saying, you're flying a one-man ship in a three-dimensional environment shooting numerous kinds of enemies, both ships and robots. And all of these are different, have unique to them skills and capabilities, like releasing smaller drones to attack you or stealing from you. There's a lot of them and they all require a different approach, which not only keeps the game entertaining for longer, but forces you to adapt and change your in-game strategy on the fly. Some may find it troublesome, I think it keeps Descent 2 fresh and fun. Same as in first Descent, most of action takes place in closed-off maze-like in design complexes, but this time the enemy AI has been considerably improved, and apparently can learn over time and even counter some of your tactics. The game is 30 levels strong, with the last one taking place inside enemy mothership. It's worth pointing out that for whatever the reason, first few stages are much less interesting and fun than the rest of them, but I suppose it's to keep them easier, so it's sorta tutorial-like experience. Compared to original, Descent 2 offers new weapons, new types of enemies, afterburner, energy to shield converter and improved graphics and sound. So, as you can see, whichever words I dress it in, the original sentence still stands correct. Descent 2 is Descent 1 but better. And if you like the first game, you'll love the second. Command & Conquer Red Alert is a prequel to year prior's Command & Conquer. It takes place years before NOT and GDI ever existed and depicts a fictional conflict between Soviets and the Allies. In this alternate past, Einstein decided to eliminate Hitler before he could even become a threat, thus preventing the World War II as history remembers it. By stopping one evil, however, he unknowingly took part in creation of another. Stalin's Soviet Union, and one that aimed to conquer all of Europe. Red Alert is still a real-time strategy with an isometric semi-top-down perspective built on a 2D engine. As in original Command & Conquer, you have to mine resources to train units and erect buildings, but they're your everyday ore and gems, as Tiberium hasn't arrived on Earth yet. Gems are worth more, but also regenerate in time. While building, training, manufacturing of defensive structures, you have to make sure to supply them with power. So the bigger your base will be, the more power it will use, and in turn, more power plants will have to be funded. In Red Alert, you can capture and use enemy's unit training buildings if said building is critically damaged but not destroyed and you have an engineer in vicinity to do just that. Did I mention spies yet? Oh, they're a gameplay dream and work as you hope that they would. 007 accent and all, but only in single player where no unit other than dogs can detect them. In multiplayer, they're visible at all times, so their usability is questionable at best. And this is where we've landed on the biggest issue Red Alert has. While it's an amazing and really playable game alone in single player, it's not as good in multiplayer, at least compared to Warcraft 2. It's not bad, don't mistake what I mean by that, it just feels let's say dated. But since it allows for a local multiplayer skirmishes between two players with just one copy of the game, I'm ready to overlook all of its shortcomings, as most developers were not as friendly as Westwood was with this approach towards its customers. NASCAR Racing II, as it's easy to guess, is a sequel to NASCAR Racing, albeit much improved and better than the already fine original was. It sports a brand new graphical engine with realistic damage model, SVGA graphics presentation, improved gameplay mechanics, and apparently excellent multiplayer. I say apparently, as I never had a chance to test it out myself, so I'm basing this only on what I read online. It's obviously a NASCAR racing simulation, and while it can be approached as is, just by firing it up and racing around some tracks for a little while, to truly succeed, you won't only need to learn all the tracks, but also how to tweak your car to them. Because when you learn how to do it, your best bet for winning is to prepare for each and every race, setting up your car for each individual circuit. It's that degree of realism that may be off-putting to some, but with NASCAR Racing 2, it's actually worth getting through the initial learning period, as the game underneath all of it is genuinely awesome and deserves to be experienced, at the very least by fans of the genre. The Settlers II Veni Vidi Vici is a kingdom management mixed with real-time strategy and an excellent example of how sequels should be made. In fact, it should be used in game design classes to teach how to make a better follow-up. It is also, at least in my opinion, the very best out of all Settlers games, especially in its Gold iteration that included the expansion pack. It can be played as either a series of missions forming a campaign, or in a free mode that allows for a complete customization of starting parameters and even playing without any opponents for a relaxing, hassle-free experience. While core gameplay's supply and demand mechanics remain largely unchanged, most other aspects of the Settlers have been heavily improved as compared to the first game. The easiest to spot would obviously be sound design and graphics, which are on another level. I mean, Settlers 2 could be run even in 1280 by 960 resolution, which was 4 times the resolution most other high-res SVGA games settled for. The animations have been smoothed out too, adding many frames to them so that they would be as fluid as your system would allow them to be. And that's worth keeping in mind, because higher fidelity obviously came with a higher performance cost. Settlers 2 features 4 distinctive national aesthetics for 4 included nations: Romans, Nubians, Vikings and Japanese. and the battle system have been improved, adding scouts and stationary offensive weaponry. The most important feature of the game, however, is a grand return of split-screen multiplayer that was hugely popular in the first game. It's an incredibly fun feature, one that prolongs the life of Settlers II more than all other changes and new additions combined, and one that did not reappear in any future game in the series. Settlers II is incredible, and if you at least have a passing interest in management or strategy games, definitely try it out. If you have a friend that does too, and you have access to an older PC with 2 separate COM ports to connect 2 mice, you're in for countless hours of fun. So, 25 best games photos for 1996. What do you think of them? Pretty cool, right? It's perhaps not the best year for the platform, but it definitely did not lack amazing titles and gems to get lost in for hours on end. But what do you think of them though? Let me know in the comments below. If you liked the video, hit those like and subscribe buttons below. Smash them if you have to, it helps more than you could ever know. Also, I would like to thank you and all my amazing Patreon and YouTube members for helping this channel keep going. And last but definitely not least, I would like to thank all the wonderful folks who record and upload playthroughs, let's plays and other retro-centric videos here on YouTube, because they help to preserve the games that would have otherwise been long forgotten. So thank you.